years since The Force Awakens.
Seems like a long time ago.
I know, understatement of the year. I've gone back and forth on whether or not I should revisit this, but given how much disdain there is towards the sequel trilogy and this movie in particular, I still feel like I have to say something. But this movie has a very special spot inside my soul. Besides No Way Home and Endgame, this is probably the most excited that I've ever been for any movie in my lifetime. Just to get the spoiler warning out of the way, I'm going to go as much into detail as I possibly can. Not going to talk about absolutely everything. You've had plenty of time in the last 10 years to see this, so don't say I didn't warn you. I struggled for a few days to get this review together. I did at least a couple of takes of it, and a lot of it was because I was just so freaking tired from work and life stuff that was going on. The best way I can describe it, I felt like my body was doing this to me.
Go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep.
But my team, the Eagles, winning the NFC East title tonight, might have been the energy boost that I needed. But with The Force Awakens, like I said earlier, this was probably the most excited that I've ever been for any movie that I've ever experienced. At least until No Way Home and Endgame. But this, I think, definitely holds the #1 spot. I can still remember the reaction I did to the first teaser back in 2014, 11 years ago now. And I also reacted to the following trailers that came afterward, with the Han Solo reveal at Star Wars Celebration. And it wasn't just me, there was plenty other people that were excited like I was. From the moment Disney announced that they were going to be making another Star Wars movie after they purchased it from George Lucas, to all the trailers that came out, Star Wars Celebration, the Comic-Con announcements, that's a set of memories in my life that I will never forget. It's really easy to forget just how excited almost everybody was. Most, if not all, Star Wars fans were collectively excited about something different. Despite what the revisionists will tell you today, Star Wars was in a really weird spot back then. The prequels were some of the most hated pieces of entertainment known to man, and a lot of YouTubers that I watched back then went along with that exact same current, at least until now, where they practically adore the prequels. Just the thought that somebody else was going to be doing a new Star Wars movie that wasn't George Lucas, something that we as Star Wars fans needed to see. And I can speak for myself as a fan, there was a feeling after the prequel trilogy that there really wasn't going to be anything else. At least, probably not for like a long time, as probably a lot of us were thinking back then. But George Lucas smartly recognized that his film should continue on without his involvement. And he was initially hired as a creative consultant, but due to some differences between him and Lucasfilm, he decided to part ways. He hasn't been shy about his thoughts on the sequel trilogy, saying that Last Jedi and Rogue One are the best ones to come out of this era. If he feels that way, that's his right. But back when I saw this, I left the theater with this huge elated feeling. I mean, the fact that this was a sequel to the original trilogy, some of the most beloved pieces of entertainment in cinema, Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, and Mark Hamill were coming back, and a new set of characters were thrown into the mix. Even J.J. Abrams in the director's chair, who had some success with the Star Trek franchise at that time, along with shows like Alias and Lost. On top of that, he's a big Star Wars fan. If you watch and read any interviews with the guy, he makes it pretty clear. I would imagine that would be me making a Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire or Tom Holland.
Dream coming true.
But as I walked out of the theater, I can still remember to this day thinking,
it was the most incredible experience of my life.
And I saw this movie 5 times in theaters, and I still have yet to have a cinematic experience that could even come close to that. And of course, the following 2 sequels occurred, and to go into all that, that's a different discussion for another day. But I've discussed it a little bit in my revisiting of Rise of Skywalker earlier this year. Last Jedi I may or may not revisit in the future, but I can't guarantee that. Solo and Rogue One, well, again, we'll talk about those another time. But with Force Awakens, this is probably the least controversial of the 3. It's often considered to be a rehash or a remake of A New Hope, but it did get universal praise upon its release. And I was very pleased to say that rewatching this a few nights ago, I still had a lot of fun with this, and I have no shame in saying this, and if you want to hate me for it, go right ahead. This is my favorite Star Wars movie ever made. If I have to die on that hill alone, then so be it. Criticize the following sequels all you want, but the setup that Force Awakens offers is exactly what Star Wars needed at that time. And we'll address this as we go on, but this is not a rehash or a remake of A New Hope. You know what? Let's get all that stuff out of the way. I'm sorry, but this movie's not about Starkiller Base. A New Hope was all about destroying the Death Star. This one is about finding Luke Skywalker. Darth Vader is not the main point of A New Hope. Kylo Ren, in comparison to Darth Vader, at least when you compare those 2 movies side by side, he has more development to him than Darth Vader ever did. In that movie, at least. We hear from Obi-Wan that Vader helped the Empire destroy all the remaining Jedi, and Vader says to him in the final fight, "When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master." I would imagine some audiences back then went, "What does that mean?" And even though Vader is very intimidating in that movie, he does have some sort of checks and balances to him, with Governor Tarkin telling him, Vader, let him go. Kylo Ren doesn't have any of those safeguards. He is more or less free to do whatever the hell he wants. And if you really want to boil down to it, R2-D2 having information about the Death Star, similar to BB-8 carrying the map to Luke Skywalker, yeah, that is very similar, but the information is very different. And Poe Dameron was not royalty like Leia was in A New Hope. Actually, to shift gears, we'll address more of that stuff as we go on, because I'm starting to already get into the weeds on this, and I don't want to get too ahead of myself here. But the story of The Force Awakens sees us 30 years after the defeat of the Empire, out of which has grown the First Order, led by Kylo Ren and his Supreme Leader Snoke, who are in search for Luke Skywalker to eliminate him, while the Resistance, the military branch of the New Republic, is in search of Luke. We find Poe Dameron, played by Oscar Isaac, on the planet Jakku, meeting with this old man, played by Max von Sydow, who has the information that he needs to find Luke. Meanwhile, this big force of the First Order arrives to obtain the information, led by Kylo Ren. Just like in all the other Star Wars movies, including the following 2 sequels, the opening scene demonstrates the power of the villain, or the force of opposition. This is probably the most brutal that we've ever seen the Empire. If you want to qualify the First Order as the Empire, it's basically the Empire reborn. Even compared to the anthology films, and I haven't fully gotten through Andor yet, but this is probably the most visceral that we've seen from the Empire since Empire Strikes Back, when we saw them torturing Han in Cloud City. From the opening crawl, when we first see the words Luke Skywalker has vanished, immediately, back when I saw this, I was locked in. Even now, it still manages to grip my attention. And I love how the opening shot where we see that planet being covered by that silhouette of that Star Destroyer doesn't necessarily try to replicate the iconic opening shot from A New Hope. It's a more subtle and ominous approach here. For copyright reasons, I can't play it, but the way John Williams' music cues in, going duh, dun, 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 dun. I'm getting shivers now just thinking about it. But yeah, I really love how they construct the whole attack on this village, really emphasizing the fear and dread that comes with the First Order. That just like the Empire, the First Order is not to be messed around with. Not only are we introduced to Poe Dameron, but we get our introductions to Finn and Kylo Ren. Finn is a stormtrooper who experiences a change of heart when he sees his buddy die right in front of him. You pile that on top of seeing all these people getting slaughtered right in front of him, and he realizes immediately that he doesn't want to be a part of this. Kylo Ren as an adversary is someone that you don't want to mess with either. He turns out to be a very insecure villain that nobody really fears, except for maybe a few First Order officers. Having a 3-pronged lightsaber. I remember very specifically back when the first teaser came out, people were blowing their stack over how impractical that design was. You know what? I don't give 2 shits. That lightsaber design is badass. But what about the double-bladed lightsaber from Darth Maul? No, forget about that. And how he's able to use the Force on Poe Dameron by just freezing him in place like that, where he's kind of erratically shaking. He also does the same thing to Rey on Takodana, further emphasizing just how unhinged and unpredictable Kylo Ren is. But we also get a taste of the classic Star Wars humor that we had been missing for so long at that time.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first?
You know, it's very hard to understand you with all the apparatus. I've heard some people say that that line from Poe Dameron is too Marvel-y, like something you'd hear in the MCU. Maybe in The Last Jedi, I could see the argument for that, but here I actually think it's done very tastefully. Fun fact, I think if I remember correctly, Oscar Isaac's uncle is in this sequence somewhere as an extra. But then we're introduced to Rey, who's a scavenger on Jakku, living a very crummy life, scavenging for parts in the wreckage of these Star Destroyers, barely making any money to get by. And I love how it transitions from Finn putting on his helmet with the same goggle patterns as Rey's goggles are in the next scene. It's a subtle but clear illustration on how these two are the co-protagonists of this movie. Also, if anyone can tell me this, I haven't looked into it much, please let me know if there's a poster out there with that image. I adore that image, even from the second teaser back when I saw it. Rey is someone who lives a pretty crummy life on this planet, just like Luke does. The only difference is, she wants to know where her family's at, and she's waiting for them. Luke wants to know about his family, but he wants to go out and fight in the war against the Empire. Yes, they're both good at fixing things, and they have compassion for other people, but they're not exactly the same character. The journeys and desires of both characters are very different. We see as Rey is living inside an AT-AT that she's been counting the days ever since her parents left, but there's a moment where she looks at this old lady sitting nearby, and she realizes, oh crap. That could be me if I don't do something. But I do like the illustration of her having this subtle desire of not wanting to leave the planet, but also she kinda does want to leave. I think it also speaks to a basic human desire. We all want to experience something different, but it's that leap of faith that we're all afraid to take in some way. And as I mentioned with her compassion, she saves BB-8 from this nearby scavenger named Tito, and she reluctantly takes BB-8 with her. And the way he gets so excited when she reluctantly says, yeah, alright, come with me. BB-8 in this movie is just adorable. And I guess if you want to say it's the same as R2-D2, okay, fine. Just different pieces of information, just so you know. But what follows is Finn escaping the First Order with Poe Dameron. And this sequence is where the movie won me over. Finn decides to break Poe Dameron out of custody, revealing his intentions to escape. And they get inside this TIE fighter, although very clumsily at first, managing to destroy a few of their defenses. And the way they come up with Finn's actual name, when his real name is FN2187, a small nod to this line from A New Hope.
Here it is, 2187. You go and get her. I'll hold him here.
Finn, I'm gonna call you Finn, is that alright? Finn! Yeah! Finn, I like that! I like that!
Did you happen to notice how the light hits Finn when he accepts his new name? For some reason, I've always found that to be so beautifully poetic. I also love that the filmmakers were able to make these two guys friends within 6 minutes, where the prequels couldn't do that with Anakin and Obi-Wan in 6 hours. If you like the prequels, it's perfectly fine. I'm not trying to make you feel bad for doing so. I'm just saying for my own personal preference, I prefer the way they develop this friendship here as opposed to Anakin and Obi-Wan. I also want to emphasize about the practical and visual effects here. There's much more of a concerted effort to utilize practical effects since a lot of people complain that's what was missing in the prequel trilogy. I do respect J.J. Abrams and company going back to those old school tactics, but let's be real. There was going to be CGI in some capacity, particularly with the action sequences like in space, but the visual effects I think still hold up 10 years later. I think maybe the only time where they kinda look off, I guess maybe Maz Kanata in certain shots doesn't look the greatest. We'll get to that later, but even then I don't think it's that bad. And that sequence where they escape in the TIE fighter, even though it's really brief, it's visceral yet thrilling all at once. Poe's reaction to when he first flies that thing, I would imagine I probably would feel the same way, because if you played any of the games or watched any of the movies, those things can zoom away real quick. But Poe and Finn crash on the planet Jakku, and Poe is presumably dead. Finn then makes his way to a nearby village where Rey happens to be. The two of them meet each other, and Rey's under the impression that Finn's a resistance fighter. For someone who has a desire to see her family again, but also wanting to go off on an adventure, hearing all the stories about the fight between the Resistance and the First Order, again, very similar to Luke Skywalker, but not the same thing. And I love how these two bounce off of each other. Rey is very naive, bubbly, and excitable, whereas Finn is very quick thinking, but also very witty. And he clearly doesn't want to give the wrong impression to Rey, so he lies and says, yes, that I am a Resistance fighter. Well, this is what we look like, some of us. Others look different. Let's talk about Finn for a little bit. Besides Kylo Ren, he might be in competition for my favorite character. This is probably the most original thing that we had seen ever in Star Wars at that time, and I think you could say the same thing now. This movie humanizes a classic Star Wars element. A stormtrooper. We get to see him experience his first battle and him having a change of heart when one of his buddies gets killed. They establish in the movie that instead of clones, they conscript these children into their ranks and they program them to be compliant with their orders. The way we see him reacting to his first battle, the way J.J. Abrams directs that moment, and the music and sound effects that are thrown into the mix, it's explicitly clear what's going on inside this guy's head. And Finn is really the everyman. And in that respect, he is awesome. You can also say that he has that everyman quality like Luke Skywalker does, whereas Rey has a deep desire for some big adventure, just like Luke does. She, Finn, and I guess Poe Dameron to a point who's like a really skilled pilot, they all have these different behavioral traits of Luke Skywalker. But what I really like is that he has no desire to go against the First Order. He just wants to go to a safe space and get away from everything. All tying back to the trauma he experienced when he was a child, being drafted by the First Order. Rey has a very similar trauma that she goes through as well. She wants to know about her parents, and she's still haunted by the memory of the day that they left. Future Joe here. There's a couple things that I forgot to mention, and you might see me do this a few times throughout this video. But on the note of Rey's family, I wanted to focus on her being a Palpatine in hindsight with what we learn in Rise of Skywalker. I hear a lot of people say that the intention of Rey was for her to be a nobody in The Force Awakens, but I want to say that's not what it is. I mean, from the moment she starts talking to BB-8, what does she say?
Where do you come from? Classified, really? Me too. Big secret.
And in case you didn't get it before,
I know all about waiting. For my family. They'll be back. One day.
Now, I don't think it was so hammered in our faces like some people say, but it was pretty clear from the get-go that there was some sort of mystery regarding Rey's backstory. It's a common thing we see with the principal characters, Rey, Finn, Kylo Ren, and Han Solo. All of them have some sort of trauma that they want to get away from, and they initially try to run away from it, but inevitably the events of this plot force them to confront their fears. John Boyega has not been shy about saying how he felt about his character in the following 2 sequels, but even so, I really do like how this character was set up in this situation. And they explained in The Rise of Skywalker that he was force sensitive, which accounted for him deserting the First Order. Could he be a Jedi in the future in like a mini-series of some kind? Perhaps. I think I've heard him say that he doesn't want to return to Star Wars, but people's opinions do change, so you can't rule it out entirely. Even Daisy Ridley said, never say never. And funnily enough, she's coming back in her own solo movie. When is that coming out? Well, we'll find out. On the subject of Rey, I know I'm probably in the minority about this, but I really like Rey. I don't love everything about her. In fact, the biggest problem I have, and I've heard some other people say this, like the Gold Man, she doesn't really suffer the consequences of her actions. Maybe once in this movie when she gets kidnapped by Kylo Ren, but throughout the rest of the movie, and even in the following 2 sequels, she never truly experiences the weight of what she's done. In a negative way anyway, where she's forced to stop and learn some sort of humility. In fact, that's probably the big reason why most people don't like Rey. And then there's the Mary Sue argument, which, So let me clear this up. I mean, in plain English, it means a powerful female character that has no weaknesses or flaws. I mean, Rey does have character flaws, but for some people that's not enough. If she really was a Mary Sue, would she really be able to take off in the Falcon with that much trouble? She doesn't have a co-pilot to help her out. If you watch the scene closely, she clearly has a hard time flying that thing. I mean, she knows how to drive certain things, but it's not like she was able to say, oh, no problem, I can do this. And also, why would she have moments like this?
I can do this. I can do this.
We need cover, quick!
We're about to get some!
I think if she were a Mary Sue, she would also exude extreme confidence that would have a huge sense of detachment from humanity with her. And if you're to really think about it, Rey has been on her own for practically her whole life. She's had to fend for herself, and she's had to learn the hard way, I would imagine, how to fight off certain people who want to take advantage of her. But what I really like about Rey, like I said earlier, she wants to know about her family, and she's afraid that if she leaves Jakku, she's not going to be able to reunite with them. But deep down, as Maz Kanata tells her, she knows that they're not going to come back. And if she wants to find some sort of sense of belonging, she has to go out and find it for herself. It's a trait that we all feel in some shape or form in our lives. We want to experience some sort of change. We want to find a sense of belonging. But we can't just sit on the sidelines waiting for it to happen. If you want it to happen, you gotta take a chance. You gotta go out there and find it. And for what it's worth, I think Daisy Ridley was wonderful in this movie. She, along with Adam Driver, for me anyway, is probably the bright spot. I have to mention this smile when she manages to fix the compressor on the Falcon.
What'd you do?
I bypassed the compressor.
Don't tell Jennifer this, but yeah, I think I'm in love. And that sense of belonging she desires for, she jumps onto it very quickly when she meets Han Solo. She kind of sees him as the father that she never had. She searches for parental figures throughout this movie, and even in the following 2 sequels. At least to a point with Luke and also Leia. Anyone who has some sort of father or mother issues, we tend to look for some positive examples in other areas of life, whether it's at the workplace, the church, or anywhere else in our social circles. But then we get my favorite sequence in all of the Star Wars movies, where they escape from the First Order in the Millennium Falcon. This shot in particular I absolutely adore. There's so much going on, and we feel the visceral intensity of the whole situation. J.J. Abrams has all this stuff that's going on in the background, and it feels like you're actually watching something transpire in real life with your own eyes. Through all the criticisms you want of J.J. Abrams, he definitely knows how to keep the audience engaged. Visually and aesthetically, this movie has so much richness to it, just like the original films do. And I'm not the only one to say this, but I think that's probably the big reason why people think it's too similar to A New Hope. The visuals and the production design makes it feel like the original trilogy all over again, and that was clearly the intention from the start. It's another reminder, along with some of the story beats, this is the Star Wars that you remember. Not a copy and paste or a remake. But the reintroduction to the Millennium Falcon is so hilariously awesome. What about that ship? That ship's garbage! Some people caught on to that line back then before it's revealed. I didn't catch on to it, but when they reveal it, I screamed my head off with joy, as well as the rest of the theater that I saw this in. The fact that the rest of the galaxy sees that ship as garbage, that's just awesome. The Millennium Falcon feels like an old friend where you go, hey, what's up, man? It almost looks and feels like a character, just like the DeLorean in Back to the Future. But this whole sequence is, I'm not ashamed to say this, incredible. I've watched the clip of this on YouTube, I don't even know how many times. From the dynamic moves and the shifts from the left to the right that they take in the Falcon, Finn is struggling to fire the quad cannons at the TIE fighters, while Rey is struggling to pilot this thing without a co-pilot, barely skimming the surface of the Star Destroyer in the sand, flying into the Star Destroyer, with Finn freaking out going, are we really doing this? Which on that note, the way certain characters react, that's exactly how it should go, because it should match your audience's reaction to it. Something that we never really saw in the prequel trilogy. So they manage to get away, but they're sucked aboard this big freighter, which they presume is a First Order ship. But that's not the case when it's Han and Chewie walking aboard the Falcon, reclaiming it for their possession. I'll never forget the first time I saw this. When we see this shot of the door, I knew exactly who was coming through, because I remembered it from the second teaser. Once again, the entire audience erupted. I wish I was recording it. And this was something that I was kind of curious about at the time, but also a little worried. Would Harrison Ford appear as if he actually cared? Because for a while he was kind of coasting along in certain projects, not really giving it his all. He also hasn't exactly been shy about giving his take on the original trilogy or the Han Solo character. You can understand that thing? That thing can understand you too, so watch it. Come on out of there. This is the shit that made the Kessel Run in 14 parsecs. 12! 14. Even after all this time, it's still debatable.
Not if you round down, buddy.
Some things never really do change. But to my great pleasure and relief, Harrison Ford is incredible. It's almost like someone snapped him out of his sleepwalking trance. Some will say that a big paycheck is what caused that. Okay, maybe. But watching him in the interviews and his appearance at the Comic-Con panel at the time, I think J.J. Abrams' enthusiasm is what really snapped him out of it, and he looked like he had a good time working with everybody else on there. And if you see how he carries himself in the films that he's done since then, all he had to do is work with J.J. Abrams. I think that kind of brought his positivity back on track. We'll get into this later with Kylo Ren, but I think his inclusion in this movie is really fitting because he has deeper emotional stuff going on. Him being the father of Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, he feels a deep sense of regret and shame over what happened to his son. He failed as a father. And him doing his smuggling routine, he went back to the only thing that he ever knew how to do. Some people see that as a regression. No. Not true. If you remember in the original trilogy, he wasn't really passionate about the cause against the Empire. It's his connection with Luke that helped him realize that there was more to life than money. And we see some of that with him here, but he actually does appear to care about the fate of the galaxy.
We'll use the Force. That's not how the Force works. Oh, really? You're cold?
That is probably the funniest line in the whole movie. And I love the fact that he's actually come around to the Force, because if you remember in the original,
Hokey religions and ancient weapons are no match for a good blaster at your side, kid.
But then follows the events of the original trilogy and everything that happened in that 30-year time span. Now he realizes, oh yeah, it's all true. And we saw it in the one trailer back then, so it wasn't a big surprise, but I think it was a really smart move for him to come around and show just how much he's changed. I mean, the movie was good up until then as far as I'm concerned, but his inclusion in this movie propels it into the freaking stratosphere. Same thing I always do, talk my way out of it. Yes, I do. Every time. Oh yeah, I have to mention this.
I never made a deal with Conja Club.
Tell that to Conja Club.
So somewhere out there in Star Wars, there's a planet full of Scotsmen. It just doesn't get any better. Oh yeah, the fact that Rey accidentally releases the Rathtars, if she really was a Mary Sue, that would never have happened. Yeah, she managed to save Finn at just the right moment, but there's Mary Sue moments that she experiences. Kind of getting into a sidebar, but just wanted to point that out real quick. But it's also when we see the mostly completed map of Luke Skywalker's location, we learn through Han Solo why Luke disappeared. He was starting to rebuild the Jedi Order, but one apprentice turned against him and destroyed it all. Just the little subtleties that you see in Harrison Ford's performance. You can see all that guilt and pain that's welling up behind his eyes. But him saying it's true, all of it, there's just something really gorgeous, I think, about that one moment. And it speaks to something that we see in real life, where people are initially skeptical about something spiritually related, but then you hear stories of certain experiences that people have and they realize, oh, no, it actually is real. Even the scruffy-looking nerve herder was able to come to a higher level of understanding. That is pretty big as far as I'm concerned. But not only does Rey grow attached to Han, he grows attached to her. I was reading this article from IGN a couple days ago. These little looks that Han gives her, I thought at the time, does he know who she is? Watching it now, I think he might have an idea of who she is. But according to the IGN article that I was talking about, he sees something in Rey that could make him feel like a good father again. That kind of surprised me because I never considered that before. But it also explains why he wants to take her under his wing to help her work on the Falcon, given her knowledge of that hunk of junk anyway. And also, is Han a wise old Jedi who wants to teach Rey about the Force? I'm thinking, okay? And the answer's no! But But it's here we're introduced to Maz Kanata, an old friend of Han Solo, who has her own sort of pirate castle where all the smugglers and pirates hang out throughout the galaxy. The little Easter eggs that we get where we see the Mandalorian flag along with this one design, which is the same emblem that Anakin Skywalker had on his pod racer. Even if there's not a huge connection to the prequel trilogy, I like that this movie does acknowledge that anyway, along with the mention of a clone army. And then we see the cantina, which is filled with strange-looking creatures, just like the famous cantina scene in A New Hope, which a lot of people also threw their arms up in the air saying that this is just a rehash or a retread of A New Hope. The original cantina scene, as opposed to this one, does not serve as a character learning about their connection to the Force like this one does. The whole point of the cantina scene in the original was to find a way to get to the planet Alderaan. In this one, Rey learns something not just about Finn, but herself, realizing her deepest fears are coming true. Does anything like that happen in the original cantina scene in A New Hope?
N-O! No!
Also, Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi, that has weird creatures in it. Attack of the Clones, when Obi-Wan and Anakin are looking for Zam Wesell, same thing. If it was fine then, how come it's not fine now? Different things are happening in said scenes. They are not the same just because they have weird creatures in it. I'm going on another sidebar here. When I hear people pull it down to those points, oh my god, there's an X-Wing in it. Oh my god, there's a Stormtrooper. It's just the same movie as A New Hope. And especially when they mention Starkiller Base. It's just like A New Hope because they have a giant space station in it. Yeah, but they do that in like 2 or 3 other Star Wars films as well. Return of the Jedi and The Phantom Menace. That's just a Star Wars thing. Well, there's lightsabers in the movie. Yeah, obviously. Okay, ranting done. For now, anyway. But it's in this moment, as I mentioned earlier, with Finn telling Rey the truth about his past. He has no desire to join the fight. He wants to get as far away from it as possible. And Maz Kanata is able to see the fear right behind his eyes. She has a keen awareness and understanding of what goes on with certain people. Similar to Yoda, nothing gets past her. As for the design of Maz Kanata, I think she looks perfectly fine. Maybe a couple of shots she does look a little obviously CG, and I think it was a motion capture effect that Lupita Nyong'o was able to do. I heard some people like Chris Stuckman say at the time that he would have preferred a practical effect of some kind like Yoda in Empire Strikes Back. You wouldn't have gotten the same sort of subtleties that she's able to convey with her eyes. The whole point of the character is how her eyes are able to see through certain people. The visual effects like that are done for a reason, and that's the reason for it. But it's in this moment where Rey discovers Luke's lightsaber down below. She goes down to this basement and sees in this little treasure chest Luke's lightsaber and experiences this Force vision of some kind. And then she sees herself as a young child calling out to the ship, which as we know now, with Rise of Skywalker in mind, her parents were on board. And we hear the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Oh! I still get chills over that. I want to talk about real quick of why did the lightsaber call out to Rey? At the time when I first saw this, I thought with Maz Kanata's line right here,
That lightsaber was Luke's and his father's before him, and now it calls to you.
oh! So she's Luke's kid. Or his niece, whatever. Of course, now we all know that's not true. She's a Palpatine. Knowing how she was going to be the rightful owner in the future of the Jedi, I could see how the Force was able to will that lightsaber to call out to her, and that she was actually the good side of Palpatine, which, if you were to really think about it, it's the opposite of what the Palpatines were able to do for the Skywalkers in the prequel trilogy. She brings a Skywalker back to the light, as opposed to her grandfather bringing a Skywalker into the darkness. This movie, along with the following 2 sequels, I see as a correction of that. I think it's a little bit of a stretch, but when I think about it more and more, I'm alright with that here. Although, I would have preferred if she was the descendant of Luke Skywalker somehow. I'm not the one making the movie. There's a reason why I don't work in Hollywood. But this is probably the most vulnerable that we see Rey at this point in this movie, where she has to accept the truth that her parents aren't coming back, giving her the wisdom also of how to tap into the Force, which she'll use later on in her fight with Kylo Ren. Inevitably, the First Order arrives, where Han, Finn, and Chewie have to fight off the stormtroopers outside, and Finn gets a taste of his first lightsaber fight against this one soldier, using a stun baton against him. Do we all remember the plethora of memes that came out of that moment? I know I do. But the Resistance arrives, and we see that Poe Dameron is actually still alive, leading this airborne attack. And we get this really awesome tracking shot of Poe taking down all of these TIE fighters and all the other stormtroopers nearby. Luke, Han, Anakin, sorry, but step aside.
He's the best frickin' pilot in the galaxy. That's who he is.
I also want to point out the musical score in this moment, the March of the Resistance, which is the opposite of the Imperial March. This, along with Rey's theme, are my favorite tracks from the soundtrack. John Williams' music, while it's more or less recycled in this one, you cannot argue with me about John Williams, okay? You just can't. This guy still knows how to hit you in all the right feels. But Rey gets captured by Kylo Ren and brought to Starkiller Base where she gets interrogated by him, and he uses the ability to try to read her mind through the Force in order to obtain the information, which is another Force ability that I really like. I've held it off for long enough, though. Let's talk about Kylo Ren, played by Adam Driver. I absolutely adore this character. Some people at the time initially complained about the route he went down when they reveal who he's related to. I freaking loved it, though. And the fact that this was revealed to us right away who his identity was, I mean, if it was really a rehash of A New Hope, they wouldn't have done that here. I mean, when it's revealed that he's the son of Han Solo, shook me to my core at the time. I remember very specifically my dad, who was sitting 2 seats away from me.
Holy shit.
As for my reaction,
What? What?
Kylo Ren is arguably the most complex character that Star Wars has had in years. To say that he is basically a copy of Darth Vader, no, you couldn't be farther from the truth. Yeah, he's basically a fanboy of Darth Vader, but that's the point. He's trying so hard to live up to that legacy, but he's never going to live up to that, which Rey is able to fire back with in the Force-off that they have. As opposed to Darth Vader, who was very demanding and intimidating and everybody feared, Kylo Ren is insecure and one that, maybe with a few exceptions, nobody really fears. As opposed to his grandfather, he's naturally light but wants to be in the dark, whereas Anakin is naturally dark but wanted to be in the light. There's something going on inside of Ben Solo that makes him want to go back to the light, so he has to do whatever he feels like it takes to further entrench himself into the darkness. Playing into what I was talking about earlier with Han Solo, they show us in the conversation between Han and Leia that there was a lot of Darth Vader inside of their son, and the only way they felt like they could fix that is by sending him off to train with Luke. Ben Solo felt some sort of abandonment because of that, and he felt like his parents saw him as a monster, and with all the gaslighting that Snoke was able to throw his way, he was able to bring out that darkness into full form. Ben still loves his parents, but he still feels a strong hatred and disdain towards them because of how he felt they treated him when he was a child. Major props to Adam Driver. He, throughout all these 3 movies, is spectacular. He's able to convey all the struggles that we want to see in this character. Also, he served in the Marines at one point in time, which accounts for that stoic, disciplined look that he conveys throughout this movie. He also is a Juilliard-trained actor, so that does account for another sense of discipline too. And I don't want to really waste time talking about all the other stuff, but tying into him killing Han Solo, I wish I didn't have this spoiled for me 3 days before I saw this, because in this one Facebook group that I was following back then, some idiot posted a picture of Han Solo getting stabbed in the chest by that lightsaber. I mean, we all knew, I guess, somewhere deep down that Han Solo was eventually going to die off. Harrison Ford has said that he wanted his character to die in Return of the Jedi, so that way he felt like the rebellion could unite against the Empire over that death. I don't disagree with him there, but at the same time, I'm glad that they didn't do that, because we got to see him come back at least one more time. But when he calls out to Ben, not only did I shake by realizing, oh my god, they named him after Ben Kenobi. The whole vibe of that moment, when the music just disappeared, I knew that Han Solo was going to die right there. The struggle that's going on inside Ben Solo is explicitly clear with the visual look of half of his face being covered in blue and the other half in red. Just like when he was praying to Vader's helmet earlier on, half of his face was in the dark. This whole scene is just a gut punch in all the right ways. Both actors are able to convey the emotions that are required so perfectly that I don't see how any other way you could have done this. But 2 things that are just so heart-wrenching. Chewie's reaction to Han's death freaked the hell out of me. It was just too raw. And Han touching his son's face the way he did before he falls off that railing plays into the eventual turn of Ben Solo back to the good side. Some people would argue that Han Solo died for nothing. Come on. Weren't you paying attention in Rise of Skywalker? That's not what happened. In fact, that ties into this previous conversation that Leia has with Han, where she expresses regret over sending Ben away, and Han is not sure if he's going to be able to reach his son, but Leia says to him, Luke's a Jedi. You're his father. Ben Solo clearly looked up to his father, which accounts for why he was able to eventually turn back to the light. Luke, as his uncle, can only do so much, but it's his parents are the ones that can really help him see that no, they actually still do love him. And it's also clear where right after he falls off, that's not the face of someone who wants to be settled into the dark for good. We hear Snoke say later on, the deed split his spirit to the bone. And then follows the fight he has with Finn and Rey. After everything that happened with Finn running away and seeing Rey getting taken away by Kylo Ren, it gives him a reason to go back into the fight. He decides, no, I have to face my fear. I'm not going to run anymore. But then Rey comes in to take over the lightsabers, since at this point she realizes she can't escape her destiny either. And one more thing I have to point out. She initially does manage to put up a good fight, but Kylo Ren manages to show her that she doesn't exactly have what it takes against him, at least not for a little bit anyway. Then she starts to run away, trying to fend him off in any way she can. She's only able to defeat Kylo Ren when she remembers what Maz Kanata told her after he brings up the Force to her. May I remind you that not only was this guy shot in the abdomen by Chewbacca, he also killed his father. Clearly distraught and broken up over what he just did. And also, he's not fully trained yet. I mean, does anybody remember how quickly Luke was able to use the Force in A New Hope? He goes from farming with his uncle to blowing up the space station of the space Nazis. I mean, come on. And how long did he train with Yoda on Dagobah? If someone argues a few months, it's not even remotely clear there. If I had to guess, probably at least a couple of days, maybe up to a week. And even then, the stuff that Rey does isn't really that impressive in comparison to what Luke and Anakin do. But Rey manages to barely escape Jakku by the skin of her teeth and defeats Kylo Ren, who is clearly distraught and broken up over killing his father, and she's still a Mary Sue.
Yeah, okay.
But let's try to be a little fair and balanced here. As far as my gripes with this movie, there's not really that many that I could think of outside of Starkiller Base and maybe Domhnall Gleeson's character General Hux. Although in this movie, I think he's the most tolerable out of the 3 appearances he makes. But there is a couple of moments where I do kind of cringe, and I think he kind of looks uncomfortable in this part. The scene where he gives that big speech at that military rally, I really like though. And it's probably the most political the sequel trilogy has gotten besides the Canto Bight stuff in the following movie. And may I remind you guys that for anyone who says, when did Star Wars get so political? Newsflash, it's always been that way. Stop acting like this is something new. And while I don't exactly care about what's going on the planet Hazian Prime, I still like seeing the people's reactions of that laser coming right at them. I would imagine that's how people of Alderaan felt when the Death Star destroyed their planet. I mean, can you imagine being on the planet Earth and we see this force of destruction coming right at us? My apologies, I accidentally bumped my camera. As for Starkiller Base, okay, yeah, if you were to really look at it at face value, it's really just another Death Star, but it's really just a familiar backdrop for these characters to experience the arcs that they're going through. Can you say a similar thing about the Death Star? Rey does not blow up Starkiller Base, and Finn does not come to Rey's rescue against Kylo Ren. It is not a remake. Can we please stop pretending that it was? But really my biggest issue is that this movie takes a big 30-minute detour to focus on destroying Starkiller Base, taking away from what we were originally going to do, finding Luke Skywalker. I mean, it is important to go through these things, yes, and I'm not entirely offended by that because of what we experienced with Rey and Finn and Kylo Ren, but after a while it does kind of wear out its welcome for me. And the fact that I was watching this a few nights ago, right in the middle of the start of winter, I actually felt kind of cold while watching it, just like I do whenever I watch the Battle of Hoth and Empire Strikes Back. I guess I chose the right time period for it to come out during Christmas time. Oh, real quick about Leia. She's not in there for very long, but I really did like her inclusion and how she still maintains hope in her son coming back to the light.
There's still light in him, I know it.
You know what, Your Worshipfulness? You are exactly like your mother. But eventually R2 wakes up, giving us the last piece we need to find Luke Skywalker. So, why exactly did he turn on? I guess maybe because he was keeping an eye out for Rey. I don't want to get too deep into that right now, but I guess if he had to think that maybe if he heard the stories about Rey being Palpatine's granddaughter, someone who could actually be the catalyst for Luke to come back, maybe he was waiting for her in that moment and realized, okay, now it's time. Rey eventually takes off with Chewie and R2 to find Luke on Ahch-To, and I found this to be a very brave choice for J.J. Abrams not to overuse Luke Skywalker and save him for the final moment. No words spoken from him, but his eventual introduction, when he pulls the hood back, you could tell there's a world of pain swelling up inside of this guy. And how it ends on a cliffhanger with Rey just handing out his lightsaber, waiting for him to say something, along with the Binary Sunset theme playing. I'm not crying. I'm not crying. I'm not. Okay, maybe I was. I mean, there's a lot more stuff that I'm not even mentioning. Like, I wish they had a little more time with Poe Dameron, maybe to explain somehow he exactly survived the crash of that TIE fighter. And where exactly did Maz Kanata get that lightsaber? I know I'm not the only one to ask that question, but that's where it's kind of conflicting for me. I mean, I know in some of the comics, I read somewhere that they're starting to show how exactly it ended up in her possession. When the last time we saw it in Empire, Luke had his hand cut off by Darth Vader, and it fell down God knows where. And the way the movie treats it is like, who cares? It's here. Just go with it. It does kind of bug me a little bit, but when I think about it, yeah, how interesting could that story have actually been? I mean, there's a lot more stuff that I could go into about this, but for time purposes, I'll just leave that right there. But Force Awakens, I still think is not only underrated, but my favorite Star Wars movie of all time next to Return of the Jedi. A much needed energy boost that the franchise needed at that time, and the right amount of familiar and new stuff at the same time. And for anyone who says that it doesn't do anything new, like George Lucas I've heard say, you'd have to be a moron to suggest otherwise to me. And also, he should talk. He was inspired by Joseph Campbell's writing, The Hero's Journey. Other people have gone into better detail about it, so I'm not going to go into that here. This just follows the DNA of Star Wars in a way that I think is perfectly correct, for all intents and purposes anyway. A lot of familiar imagery in the mix and certain familiar faces, but there's enough new in there with certain characters and the different arcs that they go through. And that's enough for me to say that this is not a remake of A New Hope. And while I can watch The Rise of Skywalker and have a good time with it, when you compare the amount of fan service that movie has with this, Force Awakens is so much more tame in comparison. Tell me I'm wrong, guys. Tell me I'm wrong. But I will always maintain that not only is this the best of the Disney Star Wars era, but the best that Star Wars has been since the original trilogy. Some will argue that Rogue One deserves that title, but no, it's not even close. So that's all I have for you guys on The Force Awakens. Thank you so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie if you've seen it. Hit like and subscribe if you'd like to see more from me. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.